I encountered another fear this week. Oh, Lord is right, man. This one wasn't a surface or a foundational fear. This was a surface fear. I didn't even know I had this fear, but I've of course been sick for y'all got to be praying for me. I've been sick since September. It's just been awful. I just keep catching it. Some new member of my family gets it, and I catch it from them. And so Mom was like, David, look, you know how moms love to give health advice, moms, grandmas, aunts, God love them, So she tells me I need to go down to the doctor's office, and I need to get this thing they have that's it's an IV drip bag thing that's like immune support or something like that. And I was like, well, geez, I'm willing to do whatever at this point. But the closer that this comes, the more I start realizing that I'm very bothered about this. Like, I didn't think I was this way, but I think I might have a needle phobia because, the closer this IV thing came, it was like, oh boy, oh man, I don't want to go do this. But I manned up and I was going to face this thing, and so I go down there, and she sticks me, and it's like, okay, I'm all right. I'm managing this. She gets the bag hooked up, and she starts the drip and everything, and it's not dripping real well, so she starts pushing around on the needle, and I'm like, oh, God. Because, of course, it's not a pain thing, right? It's a mental thing, right? Well, then my arm starts hurting, and I'm like, it's weird, and I ask her about it, and she looks at my other arm, and then she looks at this arm, and she's like, yeah, I think we might have missed the vein. I think we're just filling your arm up.
Oh, my God.
Well, oh, man. I'm like, you're turning my arm into a water balloon. This was like, whew. So then she says, well, let me, so she leaves the needle in this arm, and then she sticks me on this side, and I'm just sitting here just mentally, I'm just trying to hang on, And then she can't get the vein. So she's digging and digging. Oh, man. And finally, she said, I'm going to have to do it again. I'm going to have to restart. She said, what do you want to do? I said, I'm done. I'm out. So I didn't even get the benefit of it. It was for absolutely nothing. And the worst part about it is, since I got to stand up here and preach and all this kind of stuff, the worst part about this is, now I have to go back and face my fear, right? I don't have a choice. I can't run from my fear. I got to go back and face. So no, I was sitting in the jail afterwards, waiting on my group, and it was like God was like, I'm not going to let you run from that, right? I was like, oh God, please. So anyway, there's a little story about me and another fear I found this week, since we've been doing that. We're going to change gears just a little bit this week. This is not going to be a long sermon. This is going to be a pretty quick sermon. But God has, some certain things have brought this up on my heart this week. The question I want to ask us today, which I've been asking questions every week, right? So I figure why stop? So the question I'm asking today is, what is your focus on? What's your focus on? Because, something that I've thought about this week is we live in such a world. We live in a world of, man, y'all gotta, Hey, listen, I have one. I can't, nothing said. You're all good. We live in a world that's we good? I love you guys. All right. We live in a world that's very full of voices, We live in a celebrity culture, and that unfortunately influences the church as well. We live in a world of, whether you're in the church, whether you're out in the outside secular world, we're constantly bombarded with people that we're told we should be listening to. We should be listening to this voice, like every stinking day, what energy drink does Dwayne The Rock Johnson think I should be drinking, right? And within the church, what does Zach Williams think about this? What is, right? We live in this culture that is just, we're inundated with others' voices, others' opinions, right? And that's not all bad, but we got TikTok, Facebook, YouTube. The list just goes on and on and on. TV, radio, right? constantly feeding us messages that we need, and the different messages, some good, some bad. Again, it's not all bad. But what we do have, I think, is sensory overload when it comes to people's opinions and the voices and our life should look more like their life, or our house should look more like their house, or whatever. We're just bombarded with that, right? And it's really easy, I find, to get distracted by these things. So I've got some things that I thought of this week, things that I noticed that tend to steal our focus, things that I see as being major temptations that can steal our focus, that can shift our focus off of what it should be. And I want to go down through these things. The first one that I thought about this week is comparison. I don't know if you guys have experienced this. I'm sure you have. But I find that there's so many things out there. That's what social media is designed for, right? Somebody can post a picture of how great their family is, how great their life is, how cool their ministry is, all this stuff that they're doing. And I've struggled with this a lot, where I look out and I see what somebody else is doing, and more importantly, the timeline they're doing it on, and it makes me feel like I'm behind, or I'm not where I need to be, or whatever. You know, maybe it's like, oh, they're so much farther ahead in their recovery, or they're doing so much more in their ministry. In the music, I've struggled with this a lot, where I look and I see some artist that's like super popular and has 2 big successful albums out, and it's like they're not even 20 yet. And I'm like, really? You know? Because I feel like, well, I'm almost 30, which I know that's laughable to some of you guys, but I feel like, geez, I'm way behind on the game. As a pastor, you know, Levi Lusko is somebody that I like a lot. And when I listen to he's a pastor out in the west area of a big church movement. And when I listen to his story and stuff, I know he went through the journey and everything, but I look and I go, man, God was using him in these huge ways so early in life, and it makes me feel behind. It makes me feel like I need to catch up. It makes me feel like I haven't done that much with my life, that my ministry isn't accomplishing these great things like his is, or whatever. And see, in a world of social media and all this kind of stuff, there's a limitless list of people I could point to that I don't know anything about their story. I don't know anything about what God's doing in their life, but I can compare my journey to their journey and try to make that some metric, and it makes me feel behind. It makes me feel, what? Stressed, fearful, anxious. Somebody shared that with me this week, that they saw a friend, and it was some kind of video or something like that they were doing this really cool mission work that was just like really unique and interesting, and it made him feel like, and I happen to know he's taken steps to follow God's calling in his life, but it made him feel like that these steps were small and minuscule and unimportant, and he should have been doing something like that. He could be doing that, and it made him begin to doubt the path that God had him on. Anybody else ever experienced this? I want to point us to John 21, verse 17. Jesus here gives Peter, this is post-resurrection. Jesus has come back to life, and he's with his disciples again. And Jesus here gives Peter sort of his assignment, if you will. He gives Peter his new calling of what he's going to become in the church. He says, "Feed my sheep. Very truly I tell you, when you were younger, you dressed yourself and went where you wanted. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands, and someone else will dress you and lead you where you do not want to go." Jesus said this to indicate the kind of death by which Peter would glorify God. Then he said to him, "Follow me." Peter turned and saw the disciple whom Jesus loved was following them. This was John. This was the one who had leaned back against Jesus at the supper and had said, "Lord, who is going to betray you?" When Peter saw him, he asked, "Lord, what about him?" And that's what we're doing when we begin to compare. Jesus says to us what? He says, "You follow me." And then we turn and we go, well, what about them? What about their path? What about their calling? What are you going to have them do? Whatever. Our focus is on them. And Jesus says to Peter, he says, "If I want him to remain alive until I return, what is that to you? You must follow me." And that's the encouragement I give us when we struggle with this. It doesn't matter. What if God has them? What if God's plan is for them to do 1,000% more than his plan is for you to go out and accomplish, technically speaking? What if it takes you 20 years and he's going to have it take them 5 years? What difference does it make? Jesus says, "What do you care if I have them alive and when I come back? You follow me. You take the next step." He doesn't tend to give us the next 10. He gives us the next step. And the command every day as we wake up is, follow me. Follow me. The next thing I thought about that becomes a distraction sometimes is injustice. Now, this can go one of two ways. There's the obvious sense of it, and I'm going to speak a little bit to you guys in the home because I see this a lot. There is someone else gets by with something that you get punished for. That's a form of injustice, but I've also seen us struggle with somebody else gets something, they get a level up, they get a promotion, they get whatever, that you feel like you deserve way more than they do. So there's lots of forms of injustice. I want to speak specifically to this one, though. You get punished for something, and someone else gets by with it. Do you guys think that it is fair for Safe Haven, that it's right for Safe Haven or Next Step, if that's where you're at, to punish you and not somebody else? Oh, there. Probably not. You probably don't feel that it would be right, and I'm not saying that it is. But I will tell you this. Did you know that God will often, take it from me, God will often place you in that very situation. God will often place you in a situation where you're dealt with unjustly. Again, somebody else gets advanced when you would way more deserve it, or somebody else doesn't get caught or punished for the thing that you got caught and punished for. God will often. So I'm not saying whether or not it's right for Safe Haven to do it. I'm not saying that they're doing it on purpose to try and test and grow you, but what I am saying is that God is bigger than them, and God will often put us in those situations. He'll put you in those situations after you leave Safe Haven to test you, to grow you, to help you see things about yourself. And see, the path of walking out this journey is taking responsibility. Like, it doesn't matter what they get. Again, like Jesus is saying, what does it matter if I let them get by with everything? You follow me. And what does that look like? That looks like taking responsibility. God, help me see what I can change. Help me see the truth about myself. 1 Corinthians 11:31. Paul says, if we were more discerning with regard to ourselves, we would not come under such judgment. I like the Amplified version because it puts a little more in there. It says, if we evaluated and judged ourselves honestly, recognizing our shortcomings and correcting our behavior, we would not be judged. We would not come under such judgment. So my encouragement to you guys that maybe struggle with that distraction is this, yet again, and you're going to see that this is really the message today. What's your focus on? Is it on what someone else is doing, what somebody else is getting, what somebody else is accomplishing, or is it on God? Is it on Jesus? Is it on the next step? As Jesus said to Peter, you follow me. Another distraction that I listed out here is what somebody else believes. I'm going to loop back around to social media here. What somebody else believes. That's what social media is built for, is to hand everybody a megaphone that they can shout what they believe, what they think about this, about that. And I'm going to tell you, that can very easily become something that trips us up. When we get so focused, listen, can we get good things from other people? Can we receive truth? Can other people say things that lead us closer to God? Absolutely. But guys, nobody has it all right. I miss it all the time. I come to a point in my maturity where I look back on a sermon or whatever, a stance I took a year ago or whatever, and I go, man, that was not quite on point. So there's nobody that we can just tune into directly. And here's what I'll tell you. If you do not develop the ears to hear God for yourself, if you are utilizing someone else's ears, then you're never really going to have a relationship with Him because you're going to be limited to what they have right and what they have wrong. And see, this is a real temptation in the world that we live in of, again, celebrity worship, again, in or out of the church, celebrity worship, social media, where everybody's out there saying their opinion, what this person thinks, what that person thinks, what they say about this, what they say about that, what that denomination believes. You see what I mean? And here's the thing. We have to develop our own ears to hear God. If our focus is off over here, then you know what? Like with the injustice thing, if I'm focusing on the vehicle over here, what happens to my driving? I may or may not end up on the road, right? Because I'm not focusing on the path in front of me, I'm focusing on this. And I see this sometimes where I hear this person or that thing that somebody said derailed somebody or whatever. And listen, if somebody occupies such a position in your walk with God that something they say can derail your faith, I have a problem with that. We have an issue there. Something that I get up and say on Sunday morning, you can disagree with it. You can be like, well, that was way off. But if I can derail you, then your focus is in the wrong place. 2 Timothy 2, verse 22 says, run away from youthful lust, pursue righteousness, faith, love, and peace with those who call on the Lord out of a pure heart, but have nothing to do with foolish and ignorant speculations, useless disputes over unedifying, stupid controversies, since you know that they produce strife and give birth to quarrels. Y'all, I sound like I'm harping on social media, and I kind of am this morning, but I can tell you this. It's engineered to give birth to stupid controversies, useless disputes that don't move us forward. And if your focus gets too off in that, your focus is not on the one who's saying, follow me. Your focus is not on your compass, and you're going to end up off the path. You're going to be somebody that can be derailed by something that somebody out there says because your focus is in the wrong place. The last thing that I wanted to bring up is what somebody else is saying about your race. And this is a little bit like the last one. What somebody else is saying about your race. I'll tell you this. None of us are really running the same race. And please do not hear this in anything I say. Please do not hear there are multiple pathways to God and it's just whatever. Don't hear that, because Jesus, there are things that are absolutely true. And there are things that are not going to change and flex and yield for each one of us. But I also know this. None of us find the same path to Jesus. Some of us met him at church. Some of us met him through recovery. And so when we start boxing in and making judgments about the path that somebody else is on, again, hear me, there are certainly things that we might be wrong in, okay? I'm not saying your truth is your truth, and I'm not saying that at all. But I'm also saying, hey, you need to be focused on the path God is leading you to walk, not the path somebody else is telling you that you need to be walking. And yet again, if your focus is more on what somebody else is saying about the path that you're walking on, if your focus is in that, then you're not walking that path steadily, faithfully, undividedly. You're doubting the path that God has you on because somebody else says something about it that makes you feel like, oh, well, I need to be more like what they're saying I need to be. Listen, when you're walking your path out, there's going to be people, there's going to be family, there's going to be friends, there's going to be all kinds of stuff that tell you that you should be walking your path in a different way. And they may or may not be right. But I can tell you who's definitely not going to be wrong about that, and that's the one who's called you to walk it. If our focus is on him, here's what I'm saying. If your focus is on him appropriately, then I'm not worried about you getting off on the wrong path, because he is way more accurate. He is way more able to see the path that you need to be walking than I am. A lot of times I'm guilty of trying to make people into little mini versions of me. Your path needs to look like my path. Your whatever, it needs to look like me. You need to handle things the way I would handle it. You need to respond to it the way I would respond to it. And you know what? That is a broken thing in me. Because God may not want you to look, sound, act quite like I do. And we could both be right where he wants us to be, handling things just a little bit different. And so, learn confidence through the focus to walk the path God has set you on, regardless of what someone else may say of it. Because again, certain events this week have brought this to mind, just that if something or someone else can cause you to, again, derail, people keep using that term, then I have a real question, again, about what is your focus really in if it has that kind of power on you. I don't care what it is. If it has that kind of power over you, then your focus is in the wrong place. Paul says in 1 Corinthians 4, 3 through 4, he says, I care very little if I'm judged by you or any human court. Indeed, I do not even judge myself. My conscience is clear, but that does not make me innocent. It is the Lord who judges me. Guys, every one of you will not ever answer to me or anyone else. Each one of us answer to him, and we will answer to him and give an account for what we have done in life. So let's run our race not to please anyone else, but to please him, because he's the one we answer to. You don't have to please me. You don't have to live your life in a way that makes me feel like you're doing what you should be doing. You need to be living your life in such a way that he's pleased with you. And if He's pleased with you, I should be pleased with you. That's the question I believe we should be asking ourselves. Hebrews 12, 1 through 2. This is my final verse. Paul says, "Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a huge crowd of witnesses to the life of faith, let us strip off every weight that slows us down, especially the sin that so easily trips us up, and let us run with endurance the race that God has set before us. We do this how? By keeping our eyes on Jesus, the champion who initiates and perfects our faith." Listen, if your focus is on Jesus, if your eyes are on Jesus, you may not have it all right, but I'm confident that He will get you where you need to be. Just as that verse says, God is able to make them stand. They will stand because God is able to make them stand. If your focus is not on Him, though, then I don't have any assurance that you're going to end up where you need to be. Because I don't know what someone else is going to tell you that's going to sink in, that you're going to decide to change and do this or do that. So my challenge to us today, guys, is this. Run your race. Run your race. Fix your eyes on Christ and not on anyone or anything else. To get to a place where nothing's going to derail you. Nothing anyone says or does, not being unjustly accused or judged or what, none of it's going to shake you because you have your eyes fixed on Christ, the author and perfecter of your faith.